Yo, the Holy Knights are something else, dude. I don't know how else to put it. I kind of feel like sometimes people try to downplay them, but I don't think we can really do that right now, especially not after chapter 1142. And honestly, ever since their introduction, they have seemed to be shrouded in a lot of mystery that made it kind of difficult to pinpoint just how powerful they actually were until now. Because we now actually have a couple of situations that really showcase their true power, but we also get some pretty cool pieces of conversation that seem to hint at the true nature of their power, and spoiler alert, it's demonic, it's nightmarish, and it's probably tied to a specific you-know-who at the top of the One Piece world. Alright, but can we first take a moment to really talk about how insane these people are? Because from so far away, they're hypnotizing flocks of children like the Pied Piper, summoning truly massive nightmarish creatures, and are able to guide them with incredible accuracy as well. And if we compare them even roughly to Loki's power, who, you know, just summoned a lightning strike the size of the giant sword on Elbaf with his Ragnir, they may be on a completely different level than anyone else that we've ever seen the Straw Hats fight before, with maybe the exception of the Yonko. Like, I'm kind of starting to see why Dragon said that the true battle would begin when they started moving, because boy, the Holy Knights are making some real waves now that they're fully in action. So let's take a moment to really discuss what they each seem to be capable of and find the through line that ties them all together, shall we? And yeah, before you say anything here, there's definitely a chance that they are just an evil group with their own unique powers and they don't tie together in some crazy special way, but come on, I feel like we're getting a lot of hints here that there is one unifying concept that puts all of them in one bucket. Now, I kind of feel like it's fair to start here with Shanks too, I mean Shamrock, because he is the leader of the Holy Knights and arguably should be the most powerful of them, question mark. So what is he working with? Well, it's pretty cool. It's a Cerberus sword thing. For now, all we've seen him do with it is wipe out his swords and unleash the dogs on Loki, but I do think we may have kind of downplayed just how strong that sword actually is. That thing transforms straight up into a gigantic three-headed beast that can detach each head and can cut down Shamrock's enemies with the giant blades that burst out from their throats. It's just like kind of a pretty painful and disgusting thing to imagine. It's kind of like a reverse sword soloa. But I think the reason we all kind of downplayed it maybe a little bit is really put on full display in chapter 1142, because that's the first time that we see Loki scale up against a character like Hyrule, and he is huge. Like, my man is a pretty big boy, and the Cerberus that Shamrock summons, you know, looking at it in chapter 1138, it scales pretty well, you know, to Loki. That means that this dog is also a pretty big boy. There's also the fact that Shamrock literally says, this is just my sword's power, you know, implying that he himself is actually a way bigger and way more powerful threat anyways. And so for this to be just a taste of Shamrock's power really kind of has me wondering just how far his ceiling is gonna go. Because if this is, you know, the appetizer, the main course might just straight up rival Shanks himself, which I would be disappointed if it didn't. Then we have Gunko, who has the arrow fruit and summons darkness arrows that remind me a lot of the arrow that, you know, Imu used to kill King Cobra and attack Sabo. We'll be getting, you know, back to that point in just a moment, as you can imagine, as it ties into the rest of what I want to talk about today, but just keep that in the back of your mind. You know, suspicious that we've seen it before. Editor, can you write that down somewhere, please? Please. Come on, man. Oh, there, thank you. I appreciate that. All right. Gunko can also transform these arrows into a bird, massive stilts, and can use them as wraps or chains to bind her enemies and pierce them, which is pretty crazy variety if we think about it. Then up next, we have Killingham and Summers, and the reason I want to talk about them together is because we're just not quite certain yet if we've seen Summers' powers yet, or if all of this is just Killingham here. Because it seems pretty clear that Killingham is the one to put all the children to sleep from a very far distance, and then he seems to take a nap himself, and based on what he says, it kind of seems like this nap is setting a time limit for them to follow Gunko's arrows. And so the reason that I lumped Summers in here is because I just can't fully tell just yet if it was him or Killingham that then also summoned these colossal nightmare beasts that we see. I mean, come on, look at them. They are bigger than Sea Kings, I would argue. Loki, Evil Nika, Jormungandr, the Draugr, and even a massive Nidhogg creature that looks like the mural dragon, I think. And of course, then the most terrifying thing of all, my mother. It's revealed that these creatures here seem to be either drawings turned to life or the nightmares of the sleeping kids brought to reality. Now, since the dialogue literally says their nightmare realm, I kind of think it's less about the drawings and more about them being in nap time. And seeing as Killingham was the one who put them all to sleep, I think it's fair to say that he could have done that part as well, but I do want to lean more a little bit towards Summers here, only because he asks Gunko what she fears right about we see all these titans based on the children's fears, which seems like meant to connect these two things. And so I do feel like I'm in the right here to at least speculate that he is the one responsible for summoning and creating these big scary monsters. But then again, it could of course just be him asking about it because the children's fears have now come to life as well, which means that the only thing I cannot fully explain is that he also has a connection with love, it seems, saying that love is about hurting one another. Man, teenage me resonates hard with that one. Who hurt you, Summers? Who hurt you? Well, I definitely know who didn't hurt you, and it's the Ohara patrons. Because they're just the best bunch around, and they use their true power of love, their love of exclusive videos, early access to content, and amazing art assets to help my channel out, and just are completely immune to any demonic powers. Seriously though, I really can't stress enough how much of a difference it makes to the quality of our content here. I mean, we can make stronger and more polished edits, crazier and more fun theories, and even better art assets, which are a direct result of all the Patreon contributions and of, you guys in general. It really means the world to me, and you really help me make my dream of unraveling One Piece come true every single week. And so if you're also a person who's all in on this journey with me of One Piece, why not come out and see if we can figure out Oda's secrets together? Go check it out. All right, with that being said, we've now covered each piece of the pie, and now I want to see what truly connects them. Like, what is the tying thread between the Cerberus sword, the arrows, the deep sleep, and the giant creature nightmare monsters here? And at first glance here, not a lot, I'd say. They all seem very different, with the exception of maybe the ties between the nightmare creatures and the sleep comboing pretty well. And if there were to be Killingham and Summers' powers combined, it would just explain why the two of them appeared at once. But then who knows, maybe it's just all Killingham and he's just totally cracked and broken all by himself, and that would be pretty cool too. I'd be okay with that. Now, when I looked at all of these powers, I kind of thought I noticed a slight trend here. They are all generally tied to the underworld in some way, shape, or form. The Cerberus is the guardian of the underworld. Hell is often called a never-ending nightmare with nightmarish creatures and a lot of religious texts, and as a result, that already ties 3 of our powers together here. But that leaves us with the arrow as a big outlier, so it doesn't seem like it could be that one. So I also thought it could just be nightmares in general, which, would make some sense. Cerberus is a very scary dog, and we just saw massive nightmare creatures appear, but again, that still doesn't fully explain the arrows, and so it kind of left me at this weird crossroad, and the thorn in my side was this stupid person here. Stupid Gunko, why do you all have to screw up my theorizing plans? What's your deal? Let's just say this person does not fit in at all. She's not a celestial dragon. Her powers don't add up, and it kind of really pisses me off. Like, why can't you just fall in line nicely with everyone else here? And then it actually hit me. Why doesn't Gunko line up with the rest of the squad? And why does it seem like Summers doesn't really know her that well as well? That was a lot of as well. Anyways, I don't know about you, but I kind of feel like being part of a team lets you learn a lot about people. I mean, take the Straw Hats, for example. At this point, they all pretty much know what makes every other Straw Hat tick. I mean, we see Robin and Sanji, and Robin and Brooke put this on perfect display in Wano when Robin squares off with Black Maria, saving Sanji because she knows that he can save himself there because he's fighting a woman. In other words, she knew exactly what the problem was and compensated for it. So I kind of find it hard to believe that Summers, who seems to be one of the elder and most, senior holy knights here, wouldn't know Gunko's biggest fear, especially if fear is one of his main powers. And so it kind of got me thinking, and I wondered that just maybe, is Gunko supposed to be the outlier here? And when I consider that, all sorts of possibilities open up to me. My mind's eye was revealed. I had unraveled the entire story. Okay, not really, but I do think that I found out how the Holy Knights actually work. And it all starts with the final line of chapter 1142. What do you fear, Gunko? Daddy Samus asks here, yearning to know more about his comrades. And Nika is what Gunko replies, terrified of the sun god? Why on earth is she scared of Nika? Like, what does she even know about Nika? And more importantly, what is causing her to fear the sun god specifically, a character that's about dreams and laughter and saving people? Well, remember what I had you and the editor note down earlier? Editor, please, if you would. Thank you. Gunko's arrows are shockingly similar to the arrows used to defeat Cobra and almost got Sabo as well. I don't know, maybe that's a stretch, but I kind of have to humble Sabo a little bit because I personally always feel like everyone thinks he's way stronger than I kind of feel he is. But anyhow, what's important is that it's a near one-to-one match with Gunko's powers, which only points to one of two options for me. Either Gunko was in the room with the Gorosei and Emu during the events of chapter 1085, or this arrow power that Gunko uses is somehow directly tied to Emu. And either way, my point, I think, still holds up. Because this now really starts to form a new connecting thread between the Holy Knight powers, because it may just not be the underworld, it may not be nightmares, it may just straight up be Emu. I know, I said it dramatically, but nothing super crazy. I mean, we've talked about it before, but now it kind of feels like Oda is pulling us to this very conclusion very much directly by the hair. And why do I believe that? Well, why would Gunko fear Nika? Well, if Gunko were to be tethered to Emu through these arrows, Gunko may guard Emu directly or have been even raised by them, or maybe they're just a descendant of Emu, as that might explain the weird thing with Gunko's eyes. It doesn't really matter, honestly. It just helps explain why Gunko could be fearing Nika, because, well, Emu fears Nika. At the very least, Emu hates Joy Boy, after all, who's a reincarnation of Nika, and if we're to believe that Emu was involved in the first world many thousands of years ago, Emu probably fears and is angry at Nika directly as well. And Gunko's attachments to Emu are actually leading me to believe that her powers were either granted by or are fragments of Emu's powers as well. And seeing as far as we currently know, Gunko's powers come from a devil fruit, and I do want to lean towards it being granted by Emu themselves. Unless Gunko is Emu in disguise, and that's why they have all the band. No. Okay, that's maybe taking it a bit too far. But the powers coming from Emu, that just might be the case for all of the Holy Knights, because let's face it, nothing that they're doing seems that different from the Gorosei, and we definitely know that those guys are somehow directly tethered to Emu based on Saturn's remote detonation and mind message after Ekhet. Plus, seeing as the dark fire that Emu seems to use to burn Saturn is the same type of fire that appears when the abyss marks summon, someone with the summoning circle, it kind of seems all but evident that the abyss is also some sort of extension of Emu's powers being granted to the Holy Knights and the Gorosei to use for themselves as well. Like, this abyssal power is something I recently just talked about in my demon power video, and it's growing increasingly likely, I think, that it has a much deeper and darker connection to Emu than we all thought. But what if it's just straight up another extension of the dark godlike figure's powers? I mean, just a means for them to move their puzzle pieces around the One Piece world, around the game board, if you want. And this seems to be a sort of theme for Emu, as they almost seem to treat the world like a board game map, at least based on the way they marked off the Lulusia Kingdom from the little map here, almost like a game marker. Or there's also the totally reasonable idea, I think, that Emu themselves draws power from the abyss, like a sort of eldritch terror, or, I mean, I guess they do have the Cthulhu type spooky vibe going on as well. And I think that the true origin of that power is something that's less relevant and important right now, because we just don't have enough information about it yet. So the much more important part to me is that when you consider all of their individual skills plus their unified use of the abyss, something that we directly see Emu use to kill Saturn, it kind of starts to paint a picture of all these powers collectively being tied to aspects of Emu. So that's what I want to work with here. I believe that all of their powers, the Holy Knights and the Gorosei, are actually fragments of Emu's true power, either granted to them or designed to mirror the true powers of the ruler of the world. And looking back at it, this would make a lot of sense when you really look at all of the different ideas about Emu and their powers as well. I mean, we've been speculating about demon powers, the nightmarish opposite of Nika's dream powers, dark devilish arrows that pierce through people. All of these are reflected in the Gorosei and the Holy Knights. Cerberus is a demonic power, Gunko has the arrows, and Summers and Killingham have the sleep and nightmare thing. All things that various theorists, including myself, have actively talked about in the past about being possible options for the true source of Emu's powers at different points throughout the last years as well. I just think that maybe now we could actually have been wrong by trying to narrow it down to one specific thing, and it could have just straight up been all of the above, especially when you also consider that all of them seem to have access to the abyss through a special mark on their body. Okay, we've now covered the big chunk of it, but now the major question remains, and that is why? Why does it all matter? Like, what is the significance if the Holy Knight's powers are actually based on pieces of Emu's full power? How would that even impact the series? And I mean, totally fair question, dude. I do see why you want to know that. And truthfully, part of me wants to say it's just a pretty sick reveal that could help us understand the full scope of Emu's immense power at some point. I mean, we've seen them destroy islands with the wave of a hand by using what seems to be Uranus, and now we've seen them destroy an immortal old man with a passing thought. But you know, the point seems to be that after seeing all the crazy stuff that the Holy Knights are already doing on Elbaf, the idea that their power is just like an ounce of Emu's creates a truly nightmarish picture to me of what the Straw Hats might need to overcome at the end of the story. I mean, hell itself could be unleashed when Emu finally hits the grand stage, and already seeing what could be a part of these powers is really cool to me, you know, kind of getting a foreshadowing for that. But I do actually think that it may be even more than that. I think that if this turns out to be true, if the Holy Knights tap into Emu's powers, then maybe, just maybe, we're also seeing the true potential of the Nika fruit, because Nika and Emu seem to be foils. They're opposites, whether one of them is the earth god and the other is the sun god, like I usually theorize, or if they're just true gods of good and evil, both of them inherently are somewhat close in power levels, I would speculate. And to think that this is what Emu might be capable of doing just gets me absolutely amped up to see what Luffy could possibly pull off in the future as well. Like, maybe he's also gonna learn how to give his crew pieces of his power at some point. Snakeman Zoro unleashing a full power Ashura Deadman's game or something like that, or Sanji's Lex unleashing an Ifrit Jamba giant axe kick. Bro, it would be absolutely legendary if Luffy started sharing stuff with the crew, and totally put the squad on par with the Holy Knights going into the final saga, by the way. But first, they will have a truly epic and legendary warrior to deal with, one with the power to level an entire giant island in a few swings of a hammer, because we're talking about our big man Loki here, the GOAT, who can summon island-sized lightning strike fairly casually, being heavily wounded. So what is this guy's upper limit? Where does he draw his real power from? And what is he gonna do? Is he a good guy or a bad guy? Well, I just went over all of that in this video that you should check out because, dude, there's a lot to talk about. And otherwise, thanks so much for watching. Thanks again to all the Patreons. Go check it out if you're interested. And I will see you in the next one.